911. What's your emergency? Elisa asked. Her voice was calm, ready to help. The voice on the other end of the phone was small and shaky. Can you bring me a pizza, please? Elisa paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She wasn't sure she heard correctly. Excuse me, did you say a pizza? Yes, ma'am. I'm really hungry. I haven't eaten in 3 days, the little boy said. His voice sounded so sad it made Elisa's heart ache. She looked at the clock on the wall. It was 8:30 p.m. The night shift had just started. Usually, her calls were about loud noises or small car accidents. But this? A child calling 911 for food? Something was very wrong. Sweetheart, where are your parents? Can I talk to them? She asked gently. They're sleeping. They won't wake up, the boy whispered. His voice was so soft Elisa had to lean in closer to hear him. Elisa felt her stomach twist. This wasn't a joke. She'd been doing this job long enough to know when something was serious. This boy needed help. Fast. Don't worry, honey. We're going to help you, she said. Can you tell me your name? Ethan, he murmured. My name's Ethan. Okay, Ethan. I need you to stay on the phone with me. I'm sending some police officers to help you, all right? Elisa typed the boy's address into her computer and sent it to 2 nearby officers, Clara and Benedict. She marked it as urgent and knew they would do everything to help Ethan. Clara and Benedict were in their police car, driving quickly through the warm Alabama night. The wind from the open windows wasn't enough to cool them down. Benedict glanced at Clara. Do you think it's a prank? He asked. Clara shook her head. Elisa wouldn't call us if she wasn't sure. A kid calling for food? That's not normal. Something feels wrong. Yeah, Benedict agreed, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Something's definitely off. When they reached the address, the neighborhood looked old and run down. The houses were small and looked like they hadn't been taken care of. The lawn in front of Ethan's house was overgrown, and the paint on the house was peeling. A few dirty toys were scattered across the yard. Let's do this, Clara said as they got out of the car. The house was quiet and dark. The front door was slightly open, creaking as Clara pushed it. Inside, the air smelled bad, like alcohol and something burned. Clara and Benedict moved carefully, flashlights lighting their way. The living room was messy. Bottles and empty cans were all over the floor. On the couch, 2 adults were lying very still. Benedict checked the man. He's alive, but barely breathing, he said. Clara looked at the woman. Her face was pale, and her lips were blue. When Clara touched her shoulder, the woman started shaking violently, foam coming out of her mouth. They're overdosing, Clara shouted. Call for an ambulance now. Benedict spoke quickly into his radio. Paramedics arrived shortly after, their flashing lights making shadows dance on the walls. They worked fast to help the adults, but Clara's mind was on Ethan. We need to find the boy, she said to Benedict. Clara and Benedict searched the house. It was dark and smelled worse the further they went. In a small bedroom, Clara called out softly, Ethan, are you here? In the corner of the room, under a pile of blankets, something moved. Clara shined her flashlight and saw a small boy with big, scared eyes clutching a phone. Ethan, it's okay, Clara said gently, kneeling down. I'm Officer Clara. I'm here to help you. Ethan didn't move. He just stared at her, shaking with fear. Clara held out her hand. It's all right, sweetheart. You're safe now. After a long moment, Ethan slowly reached out and took her hand. She pulled him into a hug, feeling how small and cold he was. I've got you, she whispered. You're safe now. Clara carried Ethan outside to the ambulance. The paramedics were taking his parents to the hospital. Ethan's grip on Clara's shirt was tight. At the hospital, doctors checked Ethan. He had bruises on his arms and legs, and a scar on his cheek. Clara stayed by his side the whole time, holding his hand and telling him he was brave. When Ethan finally fell asleep, Clara sat by his bed, watching over him. The next day, Ethan's parents were taken to jail. At the police station, Detective Sanders told Clara what he had learned. The mom admitted everything, Sanders said. They only kept Ethan for the money from the government. They didn't care about him. Clara looked at Ethan, her eyes full of concern. She leaned down to his level and spoke gently but firmly. Ethan, she said, you don't need to know everything about your parents right now. Some things are too painful. For now, let's just say they were sick and couldn't take care of you the way you deserved. You've been through so much already." Ethan looked up at her, his large eyes filled with confusion and sadness. He didn't understand everything she was saying, but he knew she cared about him. Standing nearby, Detective Sanders nodded in agreement. His face, usually stern, softened. "She's right," he said. "Let's leave those details out. That boy has enough to carry already." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of events. There were court hearings, stacks of paperwork, and meetings with social services. Ethan's parents were sent to prison for a long time. They had done terrible things, hurting Ethan, using drugs, and neglecting him. Ethan's small frame bore the marks of their mistreatment. He was underweight and bruised, both physically and emotionally. Ethan stayed in the hospital for a while. The doctors and nurses there were amazed at his resilience. 3 days, they whispered to each other. He survived 3 whole days in that house with no food or care. To them, Ethan was a superhero, but Ethan didn't feel like one. He felt like a small, scared boy who had lost everything: his home, his parents, and any sense of safety he once had. The social workers knew Ethan needed a safe and loving home. They carefully selected the Henderson family, a kind couple who had dedicated their lives to fostering children. Before placing Ethan with them, Clara visited the Hendersons to ensure they were the right fit. She had grown attached to Ethan and wanted to make sure he would be cared for properly. The Hendersons' house was warm and welcoming, a stark contrast to the place Ethan had come from. Their home was neat and cozy, with bright curtains, soft rugs, and the comforting smell of fresh-baked cookies. In the front yard stood a giant oak tree with a swing hanging from one of its sturdy branches. It seemed to symbolize strength and stability, everything Ethan needed. When Ethan arrived at the Hendersons' house, Mrs. Henderson greeted him with a gentle smile. "Welcome, Ethan," she said softly. "We're so happy you're here." She showed him to his room, a bright space with a small bed covered in a colorful quilt. The room had shelves filled with toys and books, and a window that overlooked the backyard. Ethan stood in the doorway, clutching a small bag that held all his belongings. He looked at the room, but didn't step inside. It was too much, too different. "You don't have to go in right away," Mrs. Henderson said kindly. "Take your time. This is your space, and you can use it however you like." The first few days were tough for Ethan. He barely spoke and spent most of his time sitting by the window, staring at the backyard. He flinched at loud noises and avoided eye contact. He ate very little, no matter how hard Mrs. Henderson tried to tempt him with his favorite foods. Mr. Henderson, with his deep but gentle voice, made a special effort to talk to Ethan, but the boy remained distant. The Hendersons didn't push him. They understood that Ethan needed time to heal and adjust. They showed him kindness and patience, giving him space while also making sure he knew they were there for him. One day, Mrs. Henderson was reading a story in the living room. Ethan sat nearby, pretending not to listen. But when she glanced over, she noticed his small fingers gripping the edge of the couch. She kept reading, her voice calm and steady. Eventually, Ethan shuffled closer, his curiosity overcoming his fear. "Do you like this story?" she asked gently. Ethan nodded slightly, but didn't say anything. Mrs. Henderson smiled and continued reading. It was a small moment, but it was a step forward. Another breakthrough came a few days later when Ethan reached for a toy truck on a shelf in his room. It was a simple act, but it showed that he was starting to feel more comfortable. Mrs. Henderson noticed but didn't make a big deal out of it. She wanted Ethan to explore and play at his own pace. One afternoon, Mrs. Henderson was working in the garden when she saw Ethan standing on the porch, watching her. She waved at him, and after a long moment, he waved back. It was the first time he had acknowledged her so openly. Her heart swelled with hope. Over time, Ethan began to open up. He started playing with the toys in his room and exploring the backyard. He even tried the swing, pushing himself gently at first but gradually going higher. The Hendersons watched his progress with quiet joy, celebrating each small victory. Clara visited often, bringing small gifts like puzzles and books. Ethan's face lit up whenever he saw her. He would run to her, wrapping his arms around her in a tight hug. "I missed you," he would say, his voice muffled against her shoulder. Clara always stayed for hours, talking with the Hendersons and spending time with Ethan. She was like a bridge between his old life and his new one. One evening, Clara and Ethan sat together on the porch swing, watching the sun set behind the oak tree. Ethan rested his head on her shoulder and whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" Clara asked, her voice soft. "For saving me," Ethan said. Clara felt a lump in her throat. "You saved yourself, Ethan," she replied. "You're stronger than you know." As the weeks turned into months, Ethan's transformation became clear. He laughed more, played freely, and even started asking questions about the world around him. He still had nightmares sometimes, waking up in a cold sweat. But each time, Mrs. Henderson would sit by his bedside, holding his hand and reassuring him until he fell back asleep. Ethan's story touched everyone in the community. When people heard about what he had been through, they were moved to action. The town started a program called Ethan's Guardians, aimed at helping children in difficult situations. Volunteers signed up to provide support, love, and resources to kids who needed them. Even Clara joined the program, determined to make a difference for other children like Ethan. Ethan didn't know how much his story had impacted the town. He was too busy being a kid, laughing, playing, and enjoying his new life. He loved the swing in the backyard, the books in his room, and the warmth of the Hendersons' care. One snowy Christmas Eve, Clara visited the Hendersons with a pizza and a brightly wrapped gift for Ethan. When he opened the door and saw her, he beamed with happiness. "Merry Christmas, Ethan," Clara said, handing him the gift. Inside was a toy airplane for him to build. "Thank you," Ethan said, his eyes shining with excitement. He hugged her tightly, holding on as if he never wanted to let go. As Clara left that night, she turned back to look at the house. Through the window, she saw Ethan playing with his airplane, his laughter ringing out. The sight filled her with a deep sense of peace. The sterile, faintly antiseptic smell of the hospital clung to the air, mingling with the low hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional beep from machines down the hallway. Lily sat on the cold plastic chair, her legs dangling off the edge, her small sneakers swinging back and forth. Her fingers clutched her grandmother's hand tightly, her knuckles white with tension. The 9-year-old hadn't spoken much since they arrived, the day's events weighing heavily on her. It had started as an ordinary afternoon. Lily had been in her room, coloring a picture of a butterfly to show her mom. The sunlight streamed through the curtains, creating warm patterns on the floor. She could hear her mom, Sophia Rivers, humming a tune in the kitchen as the smell of freshly baked cookies wafted through the house. But then, everything changed. The sound of a sudden crash drew Lily's attention. Dropping her crayons, she ran to the kitchen. There, she found her mother collapsed on the floor, her body jerking uncontrollably. The scene was terrifying, like something out of a nightmare. "Mommy," Lily had whispered, frozen in place for a moment. Then, as the reality of the situation sank in, she sprang into action, just like Sophia had taught her. If there's ever an emergency, her mother had said, you call 911. You tell them where you are and what's happening. Don't panic, Lily. Stay calm and focus. Lily had grabbed the phone with trembling hands and dialed. The dispatcher's calm, steady voice guided her through what to do until the paramedics arrived. It felt like hours before they came, even though it was only minutes. Lily watched as the paramedics lifted her mother onto a stretcher, attaching wires and tubes she didn't understand. Her grandmother had arrived shortly after, sweeping Lily into a hug before they followed the ambulance to the hospital. Now, sitting in the waiting room, the vivid memory of her mother's seizure replayed in Lily's mind like a loop she couldn't escape. She glanced at her grandmother, whose face was etched with worry. Vivian Carter was a pillar of strength, but even she looked shaken. Will Mommy be okay? Lily asked quietly, breaking the heavy silence. Vivian squeezed her hand reassuringly, though her voice wavered slightly. The doctors are doing everything they can, sweetheart. Your mommy's in good hands. The double doors leading to the treatment area swung open, and a tall man in a white coat stepped out. His face was calm but serious, and he carried a clipboard under one arm. He approached them with measured steps. Mrs. Mason? He asked, glancing between the older woman and the child. Vivian stood, pulling Lily up with her. Yes, I'm Vivian Carter. This is my granddaughter, Lily. The doctor knelt slightly to meet Lily's eyes. Hello, Lily. My name is Dr. Rodriguez. Your mom is being taken care of by our team right now. He straightened and addressed Vivian. Ms. Rivers suffered a seizure and some complications as a result. We've stabilized her, but she's still unconscious. We're running tests to determine what caused the episode and to rule out any underlying conditions. I'll need to ask you some questions about her medical history. Vivian nodded. Of course, anything you need. Just tell me she's going to be okay. Dr. Rodriguez's expression softened. She's in stable condition, which is a good sign. But it's too early to say for certain. We'll do everything we can. Lily tugged at her grandmother's sleeve. Is Mommy going to wake up soon? She asked, her voice trembling with fear. Dr. Rodriguez crouched again, so he was eye level with her. Your mommy is very strong, Lily. Right now, she's resting, and we're helping her get better. You did something very brave by calling for help. That was the best thing you could have done. Lily's lip quivered as she fought back tears. But what if she doesn't wake up? Vivian knelt beside her granddaughter and enveloped her in a tight hug. Sweetheart, your mom is a fighter. She's going to do everything she can to get back to you. And we'll be here for her every step of the way. Dr. Rodriguez gave Vivian a nod of encouragement. I'll update you as soon as we know more. In the meantime, try to get some rest. This has been a stressful day for both of you. As he walked away, Vivian led Lily to a nearby sofa in the waiting area. The child sat with her head resting on her grandmother's shoulder, her small frame trembling slightly. Vivian wrapped an arm around her, offering what comfort she could. Grandma, Lily whispered after a long pause. Why did this happen to Mommy? She was fine this morning. We were baking cookies. Vivian sighed, stroking Lily's hair. Sometimes, things happen that we can't predict or understand right away. But that doesn't mean we give up hope. The doctors are very smart, and they'll figure out what's wrong. Your mom is in the best place she can be right now. Lily nodded slightly, though the worry in her eyes didn't fade. I just want her to wake up, she said softly. I know, sweetheart. I do too, Vivian replied, her voice thick with emotion. Hours seemed to crawl by in the waiting room. The muted television played a nature documentary that neither of them paid attention to. Nurses bustled in and out of the nearby doors, their faces neutral but focused. Every time the doors opened, Lily's head shot up, hoping for news about her mom. Each time, her heart sank when it wasn't for them. Eventually, a nurse approached with 2 steaming cups of hot chocolate. Hi, Lily. Hi, Mrs. Mason. I thought you might like something warm to drink while you wait, she said with a kind smile. Lily accepted the cup with both hands. Thank you, she murmured. That was very thoughtful of you, Vivian added, giving the nurse a grateful look. The warmth of the hot chocolate seeped into Lily's hands, and for a moment, it felt like a tiny piece of comfort amid the uncertainty. She took a sip, the sweet, creamy taste reminding her of the times her mom would make it for her after playing in the snow. Grandma, she said after a while, her voice tentative. What if I hadn't called for help? What if, she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Vivian turned to her, her expression firm yet tender. Lily, what you did today was incredible. You were scared, but you stayed calm and called for help. That took so much courage. Your mom would be so proud of you. But what if it's not enough? Lily whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks again. Vivian hugged her tightly, letting her cry. Sweetheart, sometimes we can't control everything, but what we can do is be there for the people we love. And you did that for your mom today. That's enough. You are enough. As the night deepened, Lily's exhaustion began to take over. She leaned heavily against her grandmother, her eyelids drooping. Vivian adjusted her position, letting the little girl rest her head on her lap. She gently stroked Lily's hair, humming softly, the way she used to when Lily was a baby. The waiting room grew quieter as the hours passed, the occasional sound of footsteps or muffled voices the only interruptions. Vivian's thoughts wandered to her daughter, lying unconscious in a hospital bed. She felt a pang of helplessness, but pushed it aside. For Lily's sake, she had to stay strong. Lily stirred slightly in her sleep, mumbling something incoherent. Vivian leaned down and kissed her forehead. Rest, my love. We'll get through this together. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the windows, the double doors opened once more. This time, Dr. Rodriguez emerged, his expression softer than before. Vivian gently shook Lily awake. The little girl blinked groggily, but sat up quickly when she saw the doctor. "How is she?" Vivian asked, her voice filled with both hope and fear. Dr. Rodriguez smiled faintly. "She's awake. She's still weak, but she's stable. You can see her now." Lily's face lit up with relief and joy. "Can I go see Mommy?" she asked eagerly. The doctor nodded. "Of course. Just remember, she'll need to take things slowly for a while. But I think seeing you will make her very happy." Vivian and Lily followed him through the double doors. As they entered the room, Lily saw her mother lying in the bed, looking pale but smiling faintly. Tears filled Lily's eyes as she ran to her mom's side. "Mommy," she cried, throwing her arms around Sophia gently. Sophia's voice was soft but steady. "Hey, my brave girl. I'm so proud of you." Lily clung to her mother, the weight of the past day lifting just a little. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe that everything might just be okay. Lily's grandmother held her hand tightly and nodded to the doctor. "Thank you, doctor," she said. Her voice was calm, but Lily could hear the worry she was trying to hide. "Can we see her?" she asked. The doctor hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but only for a short time. She's still very weak, and we need to keep checking on her." Lily's heart skipped a beat as she followed her grandmother into the room. Her mother was lying in the bed, still unconscious. But Lily noticed something that made her feel a little better. Her mother's face had a bit more color, and her chest moved up and down slightly as she breathed. It was better than the shallow breaths Lily had seen before. Lily's small hand trembled as she reached out and touched her mom's arm gently. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "Please wake up." As if her mom heard her, Clara's eyes began to flutter. Slowly, after what felt like forever, her eyes opened. She looked around the room, confused, until her gaze landed on Lily. "Mommy!" Lily cried, tears of relief running down her cheeks. Clara blinked and tried to understand where she was. Her voice was weak, barely more than a whisper. "Lily? Where am I?" "You're in the hospital, Mommy," Lily said, her voice trembling. "You were really sick, but I called 911 and they came to help you. The doctors are going to make you better." Clara's eyes moved to the machines around her. Her face showed confusion. I don't remember," she murmured. "I just remember feeling so tired." Lily's grandmother stroked Clara's hair gently. "You're safe now, Clara. Just rest. Lily and I are here, and we're not going anywhere." Clara nodded weakly, her eyes closing as she fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. She was still so tired, but this time it felt like healing rest. Lily sat by her mother's side, holding her hand and watching her breathe. She felt a mix of relief and fear, wondering if her mother would truly be okay. A short time later, 2 police officers quietly entered the room. One of them, a tall man with a kind face, spoke softly. "Mrs. Peterson, Lily," he said, nodding to both of them. "We're here to ask Clara some questions about what happened, but it looks like she's sleeping now." Lily's grandmother nodded. "Yes, she just fell asleep. She's still very weak." The officer nodded. "That's all right. We can wait. We just need to understand why she got so sick." Lily looked up at the officer, her eyes curious. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. The officer crouched down to her level and smiled gently. "Well, Lily, we think there might be something in your apartment that made your mommy sick. We're going to check it out and make sure it's safe for you and your mom." Lily thought about the strange, musty smell in the apartment that morning. She hadn't paid much attention to it before, but now she wondered if it had something to do with her mom getting so sick. The officer smiled at her. "Don't worry, Lily. We're going to figure this out and make sure everything's okay." Lily nodded, though she still felt scared. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she knew she wanted her mom to get better. Later that day, the police returned with news. They had gone to check the apartment, and what they found made them very worried. There was a strong, musty smell. One officer explained to Lily's grandmother. "We followed it to the bedroom where Clara was found, and that's where we discovered it, toxic mold. It was behind the bed, in the closet, and even on the ceiling." Lily's grandmother gasped, her hand covering her mouth. "Oh my goodness. I had no idea." The officer nodded. "Most people don't. Toxic mold can be very dangerous. If Lily hadn't called for help when she did, things could have been much worse." Lily's grandmother hugged her tightly. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice shaking. "You saved your mommy's life." As the days passed, news of Lily's bravery spread. Reporters came to the hospital, calling Lily a hero. Her face appeared on TV, and people praised her for being so brave. At the same time, people were angry at the apartment building's owner. They learned the owner had ignored complaints about problems in the building. The public demanded action, and eventually, the owner agreed to fix the building and compensate the families who lived there. Meanwhile, inside the hospital, things were quiet. Clara began to feel better, though she was still very tired. The doctors said it would take time for her to recover fully. Lily stayed by her side, helping her feel safe and loved. One day, as Clara held Lily's hand, she noticed something on it. A small bruise with teeth marks. "Lily, what happened to your hand?" she asked, worried. Lily shrugged. "When you were really sick, you were biting down hard. I didn't want you to hurt yourself, so I put my hand in your mouth." Tears filled Clara's eyes. "Oh, Lily, you shouldn't have had to do that. I'm so sorry." Lily hugged her. "It's okay, Mommy. I just wanted to help you." Over time, Clara got stronger. A doctor named Jacob Turner often checked on her. He was kind and made Clara feel comfortable. He also talked with Lily and brought her books and flowers. As Clara and Lily prepared to leave the hospital, they knew they couldn't return to their old apartment. Too many bad memories were there. They needed a new place to start fresh. After weeks of searching, they found a small, cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and safe. Lily loved the park nearby, and Clara felt hopeful for their future. Dr. Matthews continued to visit them. He brought warmth and kindness, and soon, he became an important part of their lives. Lily noticed how her mom smiled more when he was around. "Mommy, do you like Dr. Matthews?" she asked one day. Clara smiled. "I do, Lily. He's been very kind to us." Lily grinned. "He makes you happy, doesn't he?" Clara hugged her. "Yes, sweetheart, he does." Their new home became a place of healing and happiness. Lily began dreaming about her future, saying she wanted to help people, just like Dr. Matthews had helped them. As the weeks turned into months, Clara, Lily, and Dr. Matthews grew closer. Together, they built a new life filled with love, hope, and the promise of a brighter future. And through it all, Clara felt grateful for her brave, kind-hearted daughter, who had saved her life and shown her the true meaning of courage and love. If you enjoyed this story and would like to see more content like it, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel. By subscribing, you'll stay updated on all our latest, inspiring and heartwarming stories and have the opportunity to engage with our growing community. Additionally, I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback in the comment section below. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to sharing more captivating narratives with you.